Okay. Hi, Patty. How are you?
Hi, Doug. How are you? Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are.
It's good morning. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
So, you're an expert in all things Italy, according to your bio, and I see that you have written four books: Rome, Florence, Venice, and Behind the Fig Leaf.
Uh-huh. And I've also written another book, which is actually a completely different genre. It's called Becoming Trader Joe, but it was the founding story of Trader Joe's.
The Trader Joe's, the grocery store, the supermarket.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
I worked with Joe, and the book has it's just gone global, and it's doing fantastic.
These are travel books, right? I assume. Rome, Florence,
Yes,
Venice. Okay.
yes.
There's an awful lot of travel books out there. What makes yours different?
Well, I basically, after traveling the world for 20 years in the world of archaeology, um, I've circumnavigated the globe. I truly don't know how many times, but I've landed in hundreds and hundreds of airports and cities and destinations. And in every place, I always wanted to find a book that could sort of helped me hit the ground running. I wasn't looking for just the tourist surface of any destination. I always wanted the depth. Who were these people? Why are they different? Where do they come from? Why are they the way they are? And there's pretty much nobody in that gap. All the travel books on the market right now are basically talk to the first time traveler, young traveler, budget conscious traveler, etc. And they seem to be somewhat knockoffs of each other as we go through time. Um, so what I decided to do is take my background in history and archaeology and go below the modern surface of old countries, of ancient countries, and give right for the tourist or the visitor or the traveler that's more of a seasoned traveler. They want to know more. They're probably going to be older. I typically write for 50 plus. Um, but when you're over 50, you travel differently than you did when you were in college, right? So the idea is that when you're over 50, you're older, you're smarter, you know more now than you did when you were in college. You have more money, you have more time. You want to go slower, not faster. And you want to get away from the crowd, not be part of the crowd that makes up the crowd. Um, so I wanted to write for that group, and because there isn't anybody out there that writes for that group. And right now, boy, that group is the largest spending group in the $8 trillion travel industry. That's the biggest spending group right now, and nobody writes for them. Turns out that nobody that writes travel books are historians, and that's what happens. So typically they will send a writer or a photographer to a destination and say, okay, you've got a week, get us restaurants and bus schedules and do all the tourist stuff and come on back. And so, it's a real production line. I wanted to write the book where I can talk to you, use my experience in history, and get you really connected. If you're interested in doing so, get you connected at a much deeper level with the local culture.
Just as an example, because I find that interesting that what you said about people who are in their 20s travel differently than people who are in their 50s. If you were writing a book for the 20-year-olds, you would be writing it saying, oh, you got to do this, what? You,
I would probably tell them, here's all the food and drink places, because when you're 20, eating and drinking your way through your vacation is much more fun and important. All the hangout spots, the nighttime areas. I think of like Rome. Where do the younger people hang out? That's where you're going to want to stay versus staying in the old, in the ancient where the ancient sites are. So it is real different. And the other thing is there's a big focus on food and drink, especially in Italy because they have awesome food and drink. But I figured, well, since everybody else is focusing on food and drink, I really am going to focus on, giving you a deeper experience.
The reason I asked that is because I was in Italy once when I was 18 years old, and that was a long time ago. It was 2,000 lira to the dollar, and we had just a great time. Everything was so cheap. We didn't get to Rome, but we did go to Florence, and we were in Como, Lake Como on the Italian side, and then we walked over to the Swiss side. And it was just an amazing experience, but you're right that we were much less interested in the historical artifacts as we were shopping and eating.
Probably because we're Americans and we have not been taught culturally to connect with history because we don't have one.
Well, that's
But if
true.
if you ask a Roman or a Florentine or an Egyptian, what is the single most important thing to them that identifies who they are as an Italian or an Egyptian or Chinese or whoever, they're going to give you one answer. It's going to be their history. It's not going to be their food.
Okay, so let me take what you're writing just as an example, and let's pick Florence because I've been there, so I know something about it. What I remember about Florence was the bridge, the
Ponte Vecchio.
Ponte Vecchio, and the David. Would you include those in your book for the older set in more detail, or give me an example?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are, see, again, when you think like a tourist, you're thinking of spots to see. And for me, their history is about a story to tell. So I kind of sew the story into those sites so that, like, Florence has one of the most compelling stories of almost any place I've ever traveled. And it is so interesting and so compelling. But in the first chapter of the book, I tell you that story. It's about a 5-minute read. And I tell you that story. Now you have the one thing that's important to Florentines. And I teach history in a way that makes it real digestible, real fast and real simple, because I understand you're a traveler, right? So I give you that whole story. Then in other words, I tell people all the time, read that when you're on the plane. When you get to Florence, you now have that in your head, because now when you go to see the sites, I'm going to take you through there and you're going to understand Michelangelo rather than just from his work. You're going to understand him as a person and how he interacted with Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael and Donatello and Machiavelli and Dante. And, interestingly, these guys all came from Florence. They all knew each other. Do you know what that means? That city is no larger than was no larger than my local university. And it produced the biggest assortment of geniuses in the Western world all at once. When I found that out, I had to understand the answer to that. Why? How could that little teeny town produce? And I realized how and why, and that was the story. That is the story of Florence. And suddenly Florence came to life. It wasn't just a place with a bunch of sights to see. So what I want to do is connect all those dots for you. Most of those dots you learned when you were in school. Now I connect them and I send you through that city saying, about 100 times as you go through that city. I give you aha moments, one more dot connected in your head. And that's the difference between what I'm doing and what you're seeing on the market.
Let me switch over quickly to Rome. Do you recommend people go through the Vatican to do the tour?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The best art collection in the world is in the Vatican. I mean, arguably, we have the Louvre and we have St. Petersburg, but the Vatican art collection, remember, the church for 1,000 years was the biggest customer of artists, pretty much the only paying customer for artists for almost 1,000 years. So the level of art and sculpture and works that they have in the Vatican are fabulous. The collection is insane.
So anybody should go through there, even if you're not religious? Because I think some people might be turned off to go there if they're not religious necessarily.
Well, Italy's background, a lot of Italy's background is religious, and the way I talk about it in my book is, I mean, you can't talk about Rome without talking about Catholicism, and I basically bring it through from its roots and sort of give you a chronological rendering of how it developed. We go through, some of the more memorable popes, whether they were good guys or not so good guys. And for me, they were just, they're part of history. And I don't do it in a way that matters whether or not you're either religious or whether or not you're Catholic. I do it in a way of just understanding the story of Rome.
We've got just about 2 minutes, and I wanted to hit on Behind the Fig Leaf. Tell us, what is that one about?
That one actually hasn't been officially released, although I did put the ebook up on Kindle. And that is art, that's Western art history, Renaissance and Baroque art history for the rest of us that did not take art history in school. And it's learning art history through the backstories and sort of, the background. And it is called Behind the Fig Leaf. And so the idea is that you can go into a museum, and any classical museum now, and really have a good understanding of what you're looking at or how to look at a painting without having any prior instruction.
What's the most famous painting in the Vatican?
Oh, for me, I mean, the famous or favorite, I mean, obviously the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel,
Okay.
which was Michelangelo. And my all-time favorite is in the Raphael room, and it's Raphael's School of Athens, which is odd that it's in the Vatican because it's all about ancient Greek philosophers, which are very un-Catholic. But it's a phenomenal piece.
Well, I think on that we're going to have to wind this down. Thank you so much. Now, all of these books are out and available. You said Behind the Fig Leaf is ebook right now, right?
That's correct.
Is it going to be released as a print book?
Yes, I don't have a date on it yet.
All right. Okay. And the last question is, do you have a website that you want to give out?
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, it's pattycivalleri.com.
Okay. And people can find information about all your books and purchase them through your website?
They can, absolutely. They can purchase them on Amazon, and some books are available in, a bookstore near you. So it just depends on the book.
Well, Patty, thanks so much again for coming on the show. It was nice meeting you and chatting with you. Best of luck with all your books and your work.
Thank you so much, Doug. I really appreciate you having me on today.